Good morning and welcome, my dear medical students, in this lecture on the basic neuroanatomy or the basic neurosciences. The nervous system, the master system of the human being, or we can say the master system controlling the all systems of the body is the nervous system. So nervous system is made up of two types of cells. The homeostasis of the human body, or the coordination of the human body from the external environment as well as the internal milieu, is maintained and controlled by the nervous system, especially the central nervous system and the endocrine system. The nervous system controls the body by the generation of electrical stimulus or the impulse and propagation of the stimulus from one part to the other part. On the other side, the endocrine system controls the body by secreting some hormones, but the master system or master controller is always the nervous system. So nervous system is made up of two types of cells: the neurons and the supporting cells. Or the glial cells. Glial means glue. So it is nerve glue. Or also known as neuroglial cells. So nervous system is made up of two types of cells. One is the neuron or the nerve cell, and the other is the supporting cells or glial cells, also known as neuroglial cells. Glial means glue. These cells are electrically excited cells. These cells have capability of generating the action potential and conduction or propagation of the action potential. So these cells can initiate or generate the action potential known as the impulse, and these can propagate or propagation. So the nerve cells or neurons are having the capability of initiation and propagation of the action potential, also known as the impulse, and on other hand, the sustentacular cells, glue cells or glial cells, are not having the capability of producing and propagation of the action potential because these cells are not electrically excited cells. The central nervous system is having no or almost none extracellular matrix. The space between the neurons is occupied by these supporting cells because there is lack of the extracellular matrix. One more thing, neurons are not continuous. One neuron is in contact to the other neuron by some junctions known as synapses. So neurons are not continuous, these are contiguous and forming synapse with the one neuron to the other neuron, and the extraneuronal area is occupied by these sustentacular or glial cells. The divisions of the nervous system. Divisions of the nervous system. Of nervous system. The nervous system is divided in two parts anatomically. It is divided in two parts. The first is the central nervous system, and the other is the peripheral nervous system. The abbreviation used for this is the CNS, and here it is used the PNS. So anatomically the nervous system is divided in two parts, the central nervous system and the other is the peripheral nervous system. The part of nervous system housed by the cavities, here it is the cranial cavity, and in the dorsum or the posterior part of the trunk it is the vertebral cavity or vertebral canal. So part of the nervous system located centrally and housed by the bony cavities, here it is the cranial cavity or the calvaria, and in the dorsum of the trunk it is the vertebral canal or the vertebral cavity, is known as the central nervous system. So central nervous system is having two parts. One is the brain and the second part is the spinal cord. The brain part is also known as encephalon. So it is the encephalon. A spinal cord is also known as the medulla spinalis. So the central nervous system is divided in two parts. The part of highest consciousness is the brain, also known as the encephalon, and the lower posterior elongated part of the brain is the spinal cord, or also known as medulla spinalis, which is a tubular part, elongated part, cord-like part, and it is giving origin to the spinal nerves, controlling the movements and innervating the sensory organs of the trunk, upper limbs and the lower limbs. The peripheral nervous system is again divided in two parts. The first part is the cerebrospinal nerves. There are 43 or in some cases 44 pairs of cerebrospinal nerves. There are 12 pairs of the cranial nerves known as the cerebral nerves. So 12 pairs are the cerebral or the cranial nerves. 31 pairs or in some cases the 32 pairs of the spinal nerves. 31 pairs spinal nerves. These 31 pairs are 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral and 1 coccygeal nerve. In some cases there are 2 coccygeal nerves. Remember always, please remember the first cervical nerve and the coccygeal nerve are not having sensory roots. These are innervating only the muscles. So, peripheral nervous system is having the cerebrospinal nerves. These are 43 in number, 12 are cranial nerves and 31 are spinal nerves. The second part of the peripheral nervous system is the ganglia. So B part is the ganglia. There are 2 types of peripheral ganglia. One is the motor and other is the sensory. So motor ganglia are the autonomic ganglia. These are the autonomic ganglia of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, making the part of the autonomic nervous system, and these ganglia are having the postganglionic sympathetic and parasympathetic fibers. Motor ganglia are having postganglionic autonomic neurons, and the sensory ganglia these ganglia are having the first order neurons. The sensory ganglia are having the first order neuron of the sensory innervation of the peripheral sensory organs like the mucosa, skin, muscles, tendons and joints. All spinal nerves are having the posterior root ganglia, also known as the dorsal root ganglia. And the cranial nerves, which are having the sensory fibers, are also having the sensory ganglia. These ganglia are derived from the epibranchial placodes and the neural crest cells. So peripheral nervous system is again divided in 2 parts: the cerebrospinal nerves having cranial nerves and the spinal nerves, and the peripheral ganglia, motor ganglia having postganglionic sympathetic and parasympathetic fibers, and the sensory ganglia of the spinal nerves having the pseudo unipolar types of neurons, and the sensory ganglia of the cranial nerves having the sensory fiber. In concise and crisp manner, I will talk about the central nervous system. The central nervous system is again divided in the brain and the spinal cord. The anterior elongated or dilated part of the neural tube form the brain, and the posterior elongated cylindrical part or tubular part is known as the spinal cord. So, there is formation of neural tube. This is the trilaminar disc having 3 layers. This is the surface ectoderm. This is the surface ectoderm. Here it is the mesoderm, and the floating trilaminar disc is having lowermost the endoderm. So this is the endoderm. When we see the transverse section of the trilaminar disc, this is the surface ectoderm. It is the endoderm, and the middle part is the mesoderm. In the mesoderm, there is formation of the notochord, and the cells of surface ectoderm overlying the notochord will condense and modify to form the neuroectodermal cells. So these cells will condense and modify as the neuroectoderm. Here it is neuroectoderm, and this is the developing notochord. This is longitudinal section, so we can't see the notochord from this section. We can see here the notochord, and this is the developing neuroectoderm. Initially, the neuroectoderm is like a plate. This flayed plate is known as the neural plate. Here it is, the neural plate. And as the time advances, this plate will form a groove. This part is known as neural groove, and the marginal parts of the groove are known as neural fold. So this is the neural fold, and here it is the neural groove. As the time advances, this neural groove will form a tubular structure. Initially it is like this. As time advances, the cells of the neural groove will fuse like this and it will form a tube, but these marginal cells will remain separate and the structure will be like this. Here it is fusion and it is formation of neural tube. And these cells of neural fold will form the neural crest cells. The like cells will join the like cells. So the cells of neural groove will join to form a neural tube, and cells of neural fold will come close together to form the neural crest cells. These neural crest cells will form the peripheral nervous system, and the neural tube will form the central nervous system, that is the brain and the spinal cord. So tube, here formation of tube known as neural tube. Initially the anterior part or the cranial part and the posterior part or the caudal part remain open. This is known as anterior neuropore and this is the posterior neuropore. This anterior neuropore fuses on 25th day and the posterior neuropore fuses by 28th day, and here it is a tubular structure. As the time passes by, the initial part will dilate and it will form the brain and it will form the spinal cord. This part will again form the prosencephalon, mesencephalon and rhombencephalon. So it will dilate and it will form like this. This is the part of prosencephalon and it will form the telencephalon and diencephalon. The telencephalon will form the cerebral hemisphere. Diencephalon will form the thalamus, metathalamus, epithalamus, subthalamus and hypothalamus. This small part, the primitive part of the brain, will form the midbrain known as mesencephalon, and the rhombencephalon will again divide in two parts. The metencephalon will form the pons and the cerebellum, and myelencephalon will modify as the medulla oblongata, and this hindmost part or the caudal part of the neural tube will remain cylindrical and develop the spinal cord. So central nervous system is having the telencephalon or cerebrum, diencephalon or the thalamus, hypothalamus, subthalamus, metathalamus and epithalamus, the pons and cerebellum, metencephalon and medulla oblongata, the myelencephalon. So this is the development of the central nervous system.